Major phone carriers make you sign contracts with rigid data plans to trap you into a kind of forced phonogamy. Sounds pretty insecure if you ask me. At Consumer Cellular, we believe in a more consensual and healthy form of phonogamy, free of contracts and more flexible to your data needs. This way, you stick around not because we force you to with contracts and fees, but because you love our phone plans. Like ardently love our phone plans. Phonogamously. Consumer Cellular. When freedom calls, we're here to answer. Call us at 1-888-FREEDOM.
What if passports were stamped with experiences instead of places? With Luxury Gold, each journey brings you unforgettable passport moments. In Japan, join a private sushi making class with a master chef and witness the cherry blossoms alongside a tree doctor. Experiences like these are the golden threads that make up your Luxury Gold journey. To learn more, contact your travel advisor or visit luxurygold.com/Japan.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Kieran, it feels like minutes since we spoke, but here we are. Another of our interview pods, our special interview pods. They won't be happening every week. We felt this one was long enough and significant enough to go out as a standalone episode. Anything exciting happened to you in the last 2 minutes since we spoke to you?
No, I've readjusted my water bottle. That's about as far as it's gone.
That's what's waiting ahead for us in the rest of our lives, Kieran. It's like the old joke about actors. Why do actors not look out of the window in the morning? Because they have nothing to do in the afternoon. It'll be us going, well, I won't adjust a hot water bottle now because I'll leave that as a little treat for this afternoon. Huw Jenkins, Kieran, was the chairman of Swansea City between January 2002 and February 2019, so nigh on 2 decades, and it was 2 decades of great change for Swansea City on and off the pitch. So Huw gave us some insight into his period at the club and ends with a blindingly simple idea to resolving some of football's financial problems. Huw, thank you so much for talking to us. I need to get one thing out of the way first, Huw, because otherwise it's going to be a big elephant in the room. You are responsible, I'm blaming you directly for this.
Okay.
For arguably the worst 3 minutes of my football supporting life. 26th of November, 2016. My dad, who wasn't very well at the time, God rest him, he was upstairs trying to sleep. I ran up to him and said, Dad, you know we were 3-1 down to Swansea. We're 4-3 up. It's the last seconds of the game. And then I heard a string of obscenities from downstairs from my son. And my dad went, I don't think we're 4-3 up anymore, son. And by the time I got downstairs, not only had you equalised, you'd scored a fifth goal. You beat us 5-4. It was I can't remember. And it was the only win I think Bob Bradley managed as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was about 1 in 11 or whatever it was. Yes, it was an unbelievable game that. With I'm sure it was the one Llorente scored, and it was a very unusual game. And as you say, it was one of the few we won over that period. But fantastic game.
It was almost a metaphor for your time at Swansea, Huw, because there were very, very many highs and some lows. Take us back to the very start, January 2002. Is it true that you were offered the role as chairman because you were the dullest one in the consortium?
Yeah, well, that's what I said at the time. I probably didn't use the right phrase, but I think when we all got together and the opportunity was there to come in and I would use the word help the club because the financial state and the state, the perception how it was in the city was very poor, very low at that time, and I think we all felt as supporters, we had obligation, again is the wrong thing, but there was a need for somebody to get in there and try to turn things around and get some positivity back, and out of the small group of people we had who initially got involved, yeah, I felt, I had a small background in football, and I felt, I was quite happy to take on that responsibility, because somebody had to do it, somebody had to make decisions, and I went for it at that time, and it's at that time it's unclear, were we going to be a success, were we going to carry on in the same mold as previous, who knew at that time. But yeah, I took the chance, and luckily from that period on, we grew considerably as a club again.
Because people associate Swansea City, Huw, with the Premier League and the Championship now, but remind us where you were at that time, because I was going to say things were turbulent, but they weren't. They were bleak, really, weren't they, for Swansea City at the time?
Yeah, I think, you could, like you say, turbulent, but it was, I would say, it was close to whether we could go out of business completely. We could have gone.
Really?
We could have easily gone into the league below, which is, I think, the conference then, and who knows, really. I think the general support in the city, from all angles, was probably at the lowest ebb it's ever been, and it could easily have gone backwards further, really, and perhaps never recovered. But that was a position we were in at that time, and we had to, as I said, quickly find some solutions to our dilemma, and try to turn things around. But it was a bleak time, and the club could easily have gone, the other way as well.
Yeah, because you were one game away from relegation out of the league, weren't you? Did you have a background in football at the time, Huw?
Yeah, it was a small background. I grew up. I was actually on the books of Swansea City as a youngster.
Wow.
I was at Bristol Rovers 5 or 6 years and left when I was 18. So yeah, at that level, yes, I was. I always had a background in football all my life, and then obviously the couple of years, or 2 or 3 years prior to me getting involved in the Swans, I actually run which down here is a Welsh league club, League of Wales club, and I got involved with that, and believe me, it's just as hard running a club like that and finding out all the problems you get. But then obviously you step up to the Swans, and it's the same problems on a bigger scale. Nothing changes, and and that's what I just jumped into.
And when you took over, the Supporters Trust were heavily involved, weren't they? Because I think for me and for a lot of football fans, the Swansea City Supporters Trust was the first time we really sort of knew that was a model, that was an option. I mean, as Palace had nearly gone out of business before, and our Supporters Trust helped raise money for somebody else to take over the club. But that seemed to be the first time that supporters were really, really heavily involved in running a club at that level.
Yeah, you did right. And I think, and I can go back first, my time with the Swans, whenever we had problems over the years, there was never really much action going on with the supporters, and we probably took everything that come our way and accepted failure and problems as part of being a Swansea City supporter. But you're right, around that time, and obviously he was one of the main people who joined the board at that time, and I worked with right through to the Premier League, was Lee Dineen. And Lee Dineen was the main organiser, really, to get the trust up and running, and he was chairman of the Supporters Trust at that time. And I forged a great working relationship with Lee. And you're right, they certainly provided the impetus for change at the club, and they're obviously very passionate, and it gave a focal point, really, to supporters to fully start recognising the problems at the club, and fully getting behind the club again, and that's what it did. It provided that platform that that we all got behind, really, and worked together with.
In recent years, Huw, Swansea have developed and brought through some brilliant young managers. Brendan Rodgers, Steve Cooper, Graham Potter, whose name I can say now that he's gone to Chelsea. Was that a deliberate policy from when you first went to the club, that you wanted to give new talent a chance?
Yeah, not first of all. I think I recognised that myself in particular were new to this, um, and I think we had to rely on a few people with acknowledge that they got greater experience, and obviously a couple of initial changes I made, bringing Brian Flynn in and Kevin Reeves, whose Kevin was great at spotting talent, and Brian had a lot of good contacts in football and a good football background, and I think bringing them in and they were experienced, and that was the start. And then I suppose recognising when things might need to change a little bit, and Kenny Jackett joined us, and again Kenny with a vast experience, initially coming from Watford and then being assistant to QPR, and again loads of contacts in the game and good contacts, good football people, and I think that put us on the right road to recovery. But then I think in League One, I think there was a recognition for us to be to compete against bigger clubs, which Forest and Leeds were in League One at that time. Big money, big support, and we had to find a way of competing and being different. And I think that was the challenge, and finding a different way of playing and finding different avenues to recruit, and then going down that route of perhaps young and up and coming coaches, managers that had a different view on things, and the main reason they were there to probably push their own careers on as well, which we went along with that it was a good way to join together and obviously get the club going.
Quite early on in your time as chairman, you oversaw the move from the Vetch to the Liberty Stadium, which yes. I think it's fair to say for people that have been to both, were very different beasts. I assume that was an emotional time for Swansea City fans, but was it a move that you had to make in order for Swansea City, as you say, to compete with bigger clubs?
Yeah, I think that the other main thing I touched on earlier, I think the perception of our club and the way the Vetch field had deteriorated was everything about us at that time looked a bit run down and out of date, I suppose, and it needed something to change the mentality, and certainly the way that we managed, obviously, to move from the Vetch to the then Liberty Stadium, was a big platform to provide motivation going forward. And again, on that subject, it was fantastic that the local authority, Swansea Council, had the foresight and determination to make sure that project went ahead and right through to to completing and getting the Liberty Stadium up and running, which was fantastic for us. It changed the fortunes of the club, the outlook, perception, everything was changed. That now we had something that we feel we could go forward with.
I was there for match of the day 2 for your first home game in the Premier League, and I would say, in terms of atmosphere, that was in the top 5 of any game I've ever been to. It was astonishing for me to be in the stadium then. What it must have felt like for you and for those Swansea City fans who had been on that, I hate to use the word journey, but had been on that ride since 2002. That must have been one of the most special days in football for you, wasn't it?
Yeah, you're right. It's there was, I suppose, there's one thing winning the playoff final at Wembley, which is obviously something we never probably dreamt we could do, but we did. And then, as you say, getting bringing Premier League clubs to our stadium and trying to compete with them, and I think the special focus you get, that you're part of that, and like you said, you were there with the Sky TV or what, and broadcasting throughout the world, just to get all that, and and the fact that it's Swansea City taking part in that, you did have to pinch yourself and probably take a stock of it to realise that yes, you had achieved that, and there was no looking back. You had done it, and you can try to stay there as long as you can.
Yeah, I have to say I was slightly ashamed of myself that day as well, Huw, because one of the running jokes on this podcast is that my grasp of British geography isn't brilliant. And I hadn't been to Swansea for quite some time. And I remember saying to your press officer at the time, I was like, blimey, this is a long way away, isn't it? And he went, not for us, mate. We live here. So move forward 2 years, 2013, you've beaten Bradford City 5-0 in the League Cup final, the biggest ever victory in the League Cup final. Then you went and beat Valencia 3-0 away in the Europa League. Did you think we've cracked this now? Swansea City are here to stay in the big time. Was that ever an attitude that you sort of fell into? Not complacency, but you thought, this is it, we know what we're doing now.
Yeah, I think looking back, obviously when I finished in 2019, you certainly look back at what went on over the previous nearly 20 years there. And there's no doubt I look at certain times when you make certain decisions, or you like you just said, you feel certain situations, and yeah, the experience I gained is certainly it wasn't at that time. I think obviously we were riding along then, and under Michael Laudrup we had a fantastic squad of players, and most of them were at their peak at that time, and we were doing really well and competing well. But I think there were periods after that when we survived relegation once or twice and turned things round again, which perhaps you do get complacent thinking you can do this every year, and it soon comes back to bite you on the bum, and things change, and that's looking back. I think I got a lot from that looking back, and perhaps different decisions could have been made along the way.
Before we move on, Huw, to the later years of your chairmanship at Swansea, can I just ask you a couple of general questions about Welsh football? You mentioned the FA of Wales there. It seems to me that the relationship of those Welsh clubs who play in England with the FA of Wales is uneasy at best. Is that true? Because for outsiders who are not steeped in Welsh football, it's a slightly difficult situation to comprehend.
Yeah, I suppose it does seem a bit unusual. What I would say is, whilst I was at Swansea as chairman, we had a great relationship because of my background as well with the League of Wales club for 2 or 3 years. I got to know many of the people well, within the FAW, and they rose to take prominent positions. And we had a good relationship at that time with many of the officers and committee members of the FAW. But I would say this: you're asking that question. There's always opportunities that we could have worked better together for the good of Welsh football, and I think there's lots that could have been implemented then and now to change things at grassroots level and to make sure that everybody again is running in the same direction with one common aim, which is providing probably facilities for everybody in Wales to get involved in football, boys, girls, everybody. And I think those things can always be improved upon. But and then your other question, I think there's, the Welsh clubs were, obviously founder members or members of the Football League going forward for over 100 years now. So I think there's a lot of past really that we were associated with: Swansea, Cardiff, Wrexham, Newport. Before that, I think Merthyr Tydfil and whatever. There's a lot of history there, and that's why it probably stays in position as it is today. And and I'm very pleased that is the case.
Well, yeah, well, the simple answer to those people who don't fully understand is that for the first 50, 60, 70 years of your history, Cardiff's history, Newport's history, there was no Welsh league really for you to play in. But are there still, or are there diehard traditionalists in the FA of Wales who think that you, Cardiff, Newport, should be playing in Welsh football and not English football?
Well, there's a lot of people in the FAW, and no doubt people got different opinions. We can go back in time, and I think that was a poor time for Welsh football when those things did kick off a bit, and Newport County were nearly threatened with expulsion. I think at that time they had to play play in different grounds and play out of the country. If I'm right in saying that, I think it is.
Yeah.
And then for them to do what they did to get back as a club and now be competing in the Football League again is fantastic. But like you said there, those type of things should never happen. Too many things in football these days. People got, it's not just the Welsh football. I think it's in all football. There's too many personal agendas looking after everybody's own interests instead of always looking at the bigger picture. And that's a sad reflection, I think, in football in general today.
For those fans in Scotland, Huw, who know all about Glasgow and Celtic and Rangers, and for those fans in England who know all about the big derbies like Palace and Brighton, is it possible to give any insight into a non-Welsh football fan as to what the Swansea-Cardiff relationship is really like? Because fierce is an understatement, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we grew up, and there's a couple of things to that. When I grew up as a youngster, there's always been this, there's always been this thing in our area around Swansea that everything good seemed to go into Cardiff for some reason, and then we always suffered. So that created a bit of a divide, I would say. And we grew up with that and accepted that, but then we can't hide from the fact we went from many, many years as a Swansea supporter when we were rock bottom, and the team itself was seen as a lower league team. Cardiff seemed to have more success, so it was always that. But then in recent years, I hope that myself and our group that were part of the club's success have at least readdressed that balance, and we've gained our own success. We've got a period of obviously longer success now with even staying in the Championship would have been seen as a big thing for us years ago, and all those things have I think readdressed the balance, and I would like to think that everybody got a little bit more time for each other, and Cardiff and Swansea I think is a little bit more little bit of perhaps I won't say competitiveness because we all want to win, but a little bit of what went on previously with the two sides has leveled out a bit, and we both respect each other, and I think that's I think where we find ourselves today.
Does the fact as well that the Welsh national team are doing so well recently, does that take a sort of bit of the edge off the rivalry between the two of you because you're both united in your support for your nation?
Yeah, and again, going back in time, that never used to be the case. I think there was, for some reason, we were never united as one group behind the national team. But to be fair, in recent years, that has grown and grown to a position where it should have been, and everybody, as one body, really supporting the national team, and that's resulted in more success for us as a national team. And and obviously the supporters recognise that, and it's been good for Welsh football in general that's finally seems to shone through, and everybody is supporting the country as one.
Back to your time at Swansea, Huw. In 2016, the club was bought by a group of Americans. You continued as chairman. How did that takeover come about?
Yeah, we had a couple of inquiries about possible takeovers before the one that obviously come to fruition in 2016, and just general approaches, I suppose, like you do find, Premier League clubs seem to be fashionable for people to come and to look at, to try and buy or buy into, and we were just one of them at that time. I think that I'd like to think the way we run the club, that we were seen quite a good club to try and get involved with, because we operated in quite a tight budget, and financially we didn't stretch ourselves that much, and obviously for anybody coming in, it was probably a good position to find a football club in.
I always try and keep interviews on this pod upbeat and positive, Huw, but I think it's fair to say that the takeover wasn't particularly popular with Swansea fans at the time. Was it the sort of simmering resentment, as one fanzine said, at that takeover that eventually led to your resignation?
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't quite that. While there was disappointment the way things turned out from 2016 for myself, because we can't forget, like we talked about earlier, the background of working together with the Supporters Trust and in particular Lee Deneen, was a big one, and that changed probably the way the club was looked upon and run. But then I think there's a bigger factor that the promise was there that a deal could and should have been done with the Supporters Trust in 2016, and that would have gone probably hand in hand with a takeover, and that would have probably changed the outlook a little bit. But that was out of our control at that time, and the current owners and the Supporters Trust will have views why that never, those agreements that were nearly reached weren't reached, and things took a different twist, and they are where they are today. So I think, looking back, you asked a question about me finishing. My biggest thoughts on why I felt the time was right for me to go, and perhaps it should have been more near 2016 than 2019, but I worked so long at the club, I felt attached to it, and didn't really want to go at that time, But I think there was a view that my views on whether it was potential managers, whether it was on the way we did transfer windows or whatever, I wasn't getting my whether it was my views across, but for whatever reason, the decisions made mostly from 2016 weren't decisions I would have made like I did in the past, with the full support of our board behind me. They were changed and perhaps watered down, and everybody was having a view, and I suppose that's one of the problems you find with having takeovers and too many people having a say.
It seems, Huw, that once you've worked in football, it's in your blood, and it's very difficult to leave it behind. So were you really interested in acquiring Charlton Athletic in 2020? Because obviously, as a Palace fan, that's a baffling thing for anyone to do. But it seemed that was a serious attempt, at least, to investigate taking over at Charlton.
Yeah, there was the opportunity was placed in front of me. I only had to sign a bit of paper that particular day, but I still felt, my background is pretty, pretty hard working background, and if I was going to go into something that potentially could cost a lot of money, and perhaps there could be a lot of money riding on it to make sure that the football club, Charlton in particular, again turned around and started at least stop the tide of losing money. So I think when that was placed in front of me, and I did my natural due diligence of making sure that the deal was feasible. At that time when it was placed in front of me, I felt it wasn't, and I think the risks were too high, and I certainly wasn't in a position to go and waste millions and millions of pounds and put myself in a vulnerable position to try and turn Charlton's fortunes around at that time.
I mean, that's disappointing for Charlton fans because our local rivalry aside, they're a club. They're a bigger club than League. There are many clubs you can say that about, I know, but Charlton's history is illustrious. They need to be flourishing. They need decent ownership, and it strikes me that you would have been that person. Can I just ask you? You've been involved in football at the highest level for more than 2 decades. What's the biggest change in football during that time?
The biggest change, I think, is obviously moving from where we were in 2002-ish. I think that obviously we all know, which is publicised many, many times, that the size of the income levels have grown and grown and grown. And to me, my personal feeling is it hasn't grown for the better of the game. I think that I spent 20 years nearly in meetings, in Football League meetings and Premier League meetings, and everybody talks about where we're going to get more income from all the time. Every meeting you go to is the same thing. And I can go back in my Football League meetings, probably from the early years, and then gradually that increased, that you'd spend nearly the whole hour or two just all everybody giving their views. How could they get more money into the game? And I would be probably one of the very few, and I can remember saying this to Greg Clark at the time when he was there as Football League chairman, that never during those periods of time do people actually stand up and start discussing how can we reduce our outgoings. Do they ever how they can work together to reduce how much they spend? It's always about more income. And I think that's the big change. People are happy nowadays to lose 10 or 20 million, 30 million a year in some clubs in the Championship. And we used to run a club in the Championship and never lost money doing it. And yet people have decided that's the normal way to run football. And in some cases they do the tests on owners, and it's all about how much money you can put in to plug the gaps on spending and overspend, rather than whether you can actually, can you make this club viable? Can you make it sustainable? Can you stop it losing money? That never comes into the director's test. It's all about how much money you can borrow and how much you can spend. And to me, it's taking the football in general at all levels, right through to the Premier League, to me, in totally the wrong way.
Can I just bring Kieran in here, Kieran? Because what Hugh's just said there, we've been doing this pod for nearly 3 years. I don't think I've heard anyone in that time at a senior level in football talk about the fact that clubs have to reduce the amount of money they spend rather than increase the amount of money they bring in. That's really fascinating to me, Kieran.
Oh, I agree totally with you. In any business, if you're not breaking even, you can either get bigger or you can cut your costs. And the culture of football, which comes from fans as well as often from owners, is that we can spend our way out of the problem. But if you try that in the Championship, no matter how much you spend, you're still only going to have 3 clubs being promoted. So 21, by definition, are going to fail with that strategy. We saw Middlesbrough announce its results last week, and everybody's going, well, they only lost £20 million in 2022. And you think, hold on, that's 400 grand a week. You know, and we're just sitting around and going, yeah, that's not too bad. That's an improvement on the previous year. Things are getting better. And I think it's now been ingrained into football fans that the financial fair play limits are targets. But yeah, as I've said before on the show, if you get a credit card with a £20,000 limit, you don't get a prize when you get to the limit. It's indicative if you've got problems. It seems to be exactly the same with the culture of football. And when there's been opportunities to introduce wage caps, as there have been, the EFL haven't even bothered to hold a vote because there's so much opposition coming from owners that you'll never get it through the threshold.
Mm. So, Huw, with that perfectly sensible attitude that you had, does that present difficulties in managing the expectations of fans? Because I know at Palace, for example, we're in a league that we can't win, which is fine by me because we're in the Premier League. We exist. We twice in my lifetime nearly went out of business completely. So I'm perfectly happy to have a club to support, and I'm pleased that we're in the Premier League. But there are younger fans in particular who go, no, mid-table Premier League's not enough. We need to be spending to get into Europe. And it seems to me that it's difficult to manage the expectations of those fans. So did you find that a difficulty at Swansea?
No, I think we touched on. I think working well with the supporters' trust was with Lee Deneen was a good one, and I think we kept everything in check, and I think everybody appreciated how we run the club. But I would say we were, we never tested. For example, when we got to the Championship, within 3 years we got promoted. So we never really tested it. I think I'm right in saying most of the years were always better than the previous season. And I suppose in football, you only get the bit like when we were in the Premier League, you only get people probably having a go and voicing their views that everything is wrong and everything is rubbish when you start losing. And I think that is the nature of us when we watch football. We all want to watch a winning team, and whether, like you say about yourselves in Palace, you obviously would like to win more than you lose, and if that gets you halfway in the Premier League, that may be okay. But I think the fact that we come through the leagues and mostly didn't have a struggle 1 or 2 years, I suppose we never really had any objections to how we run the club then at that time, and everybody accepted that. But I still think there's a view that we bought players in from bought a lot of players in from Holland, lots from Spain. We introduced new things. Obviously, new coaches were. I think we had 3 different coaches in the Championship for 3 seasons, and I think we changed a lot of things. And I suppose that has provided us with a new insight each season, a new momentum, and perhaps that helped us, and the fans settled for that. So there's a fine line of keeping a tight purse on the football expenses and then finding the right recipe for success.
You were at Swansea, Huw, for some very exciting times. Is there one achievement, though, that you can look back on and say, that's what I'm most proud of?
Well, obviously, getting to the playoff final and winning that is, and obviously Michael Laudrup's year in winning the League Cup final and some of the performances, I suppose, we achieved when Gary Monk was manager. His year in particular, going to Man United and winning, I think it was 2-1 on the opening day of the season, was to actually go there and probably dominate that game and win 2-1, it was a fantastic achievement. So there's probably many highlights along the way, and it was all about, which it is, my background is in football, it's all about not just winning football games, but we try to win them in a good way and an entertaining way and a positive way. And I think those many games we won by playing our style of football, a good style of football, and competing with the top clubs in the country were all special to me.
One final question, Huw. It's clear to me that you miss the game from the way you talk about it, the passion that you talk about Swansea and about football. What's next for you then? Are you still looking for a way back into football in any way, shape or form? Would you like to run another club?
Yeah, I'd love that opportunity. But and again, I'll stress before I'm too old. I need to do that. I still feel, I gained a lot of experience and I'd love to do that. Whether I get that opportunity, I can honestly say I am not a call of anybody yet to offer me a job. So it's I've been out of football since 2019. I know we've had COVID and the downtime in football in between, but I'd love an opportunity to get back into football and and try to put some of the things I learned over that period of time into operation somewhere else, and even by helping other people along. I think that those challenges I'm still motivated for, and as you said, passionate for, and I'd love to do them.
Huw, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. When you are back in football full time, we'd love to interview you again. But in the meantime, all the very best and a Merry Christmas to you.
Okay, thanks very much, boys. Thanks.
Kieran, that was all. It was very interesting. Some really useful insight into how Welsh football operates. He didn't get quite as carried away about Swansea Cardiff as let's face it, as I'd hoped. But towards the end, Kieran, when we talk about, and I sound baffled because I was momentarily taken aback by the idea that a Premier League football club chairman would be at a meeting of other Premier League football clubs and say, "Hang on, lads, there is a way around these financial problems. We could maybe spend less money." And it seems like everyone looked at him as though, "Who's this idiot? We're not going down that route." But isn't it strange, Kieran? It hadn't even actually occurred to me. We're so used to the idea of clubs spending money they haven't got that somebody saying, "Well, let's not do that," it just seems totally left field.
Indeed, Premier League wages have increased by 3,226% since football started in 1992 with the invention of the Premier League. And revenue's gone up by 2,800. And you don't have to be Mr. McCorber to work through. That means that there's the money's just bleeding out of the game. Yeah. Cost control is it's easy to suggest. It seems to be much tougher to implement because there's always an outlier who will say either I don't want to comply with the rules, or I will find a way of circumventing those rules. And I think that's the biggest challenge for football.
Thank you to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page. If you'd like to make a small monthly contribution, please go to patreon.com/priceoffootball. And if you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The Price of Football. The Price of Football.